Republic Fleet Protection Group Traffic Interdiction Vessel, TIV Z590/1, standing off Carillion Perlimian Hyperspace Intersection, 367 days after Geonosis. Fee really didn't like zero-G ops. He took off his helmet with slow care and put one hand on the webbing restraints that stopped him from drifting away from the bulkhead of the anonymous utility vessel that had been customized for armed boarding parties. If he moved a little too quickly, he drifted. Drifting made him queasy. Darman, Niner, and Aten didn't seem bothered by it at all. Neither did the pilot who, for reasons Fee hadn't worked out yet, was called Sicko. Sicko had shut down the drives. The unmilitary, unmarked, apparently unimpressive little TIV, a quote, plain wrapper, as the pilots tagged it, hung with drives idling near an exit point of the hyperspace route, cockpit panels flickering with a dozen weapons displays. Externally, it looked like a battered utility shuttle. Under the rust, though, it was a compact assault platform that could muscle its way onto any vessel. Fee thought that traffic interdiction operations was a lovely euphemism for heavy-duty military hijack.
"I'd do like a non-compliant boarding to start the day,"
Sicko said.
"You okay, Fee?
I'm sorted.
You're not going to throw up, are you? I just cleaned this crate."
If I can keep down field rations, I can handle anything.
Tell you what, chum, put your bucket back on and keep it to yourself.
I can aim straight.
Fee had learned the skills of maneuvering in zero-G late in life, just before he turned 8 and 16, not all that long before Geonosis, and it didn't come as naturally to him as those troopers trained specifically for deep space duties. He wondered why the others had come through the same training with more tolerance of it. Niner, apparently impervious to every hardship except seeing his squad improperly dressed, stared at the palm of his glove as if willing the wrist-mounted hololink from HQ to activate. The squad now wore the matte black stealth version of the Kataran armor that had made them even more visibly different from the rest of the Republic Commando squads. Niner said it was sensible, even if it had made them pretty conspicuous targets on snow-covered Fest. Fee suspected he liked it better because it also made them look seriously menacing. Droids didn't care, but it certainly put the wind up Wet's, organic targets, when they saw it. If they saw it, of course. They usually didn't get the chance. An occasional click of his teeth indicated Niner was annoyed. It was Skirata's habit, too.
Ordo's always on time,
Fee said, trying to take his mind off his churning stomach.
Don't fret, Sarge.
Your buddy.
Darman teased.
Rather have him for a friend than an enemy.
Oh, he likes you. Hobnobbing with ARC officers from the Bonkers squad, eh?
We have an understanding,
Fee said.
I don't laugh at his skirt, and he doesn't rip me head off.
Yes, Ordo had taken a shine to him. Fee hadn't fully understood it until Skirata had taken him to one side and explained just what had happened to Ordo in his batch on Camino as kids. So when Fee had thrown himself on a grenade during an anti-terrorist op to smother the detonation, Ordo had marked him out as someone who'd take an awfully big risk to save comrades. Null arcs were psychotic, bonkers, as Skirata put it, but they were unshakably loyal when the mood struck them. And when the mood failed to strike them, they were instant death on legs. Fee suspected that Ordo was bored out of his brain, stuck in HQ on Coruscant for most of the last year with nothing to do. So Fee stared at Niner's glove too, willing his stomach to stay put. At precisely 0900 hours, 000 time, right on cue, Niner's palm burst into blue light.
RC-1309 receiving, sir,
Niner said. The encrypted link was crystal clear. Ordo shimmered in a blue hollow image, apparently sitting in the cockpit of a police vessel, helmet beside him on the adjoining seat. But he didn't look bored. He was clenching and unclenching one fist.
Sequoia, Mega. How's it going?
Ready to roll, sir.
Sergeant, last intel we have is that the suspect vessel left Kularan bound for Dinon and is headed for your position. The bad news is that it appears to be travelling with a couple of legit vessels as a smokescreen. Commercial freight is getting very edgy about piracy, so they're forming up into convoys now.
We can weed out the target,
said Niner.
It would be very awkward if you decompressed the civilian freighter at the moment. It'll be the Geyser L6.
Understood.
And we need the Daikut alive. No slotting, no disintegration, no accidents.
Not even a good slap?
Asked Fee.
Use the pep laser, and keep it non-lethal if you can. Somebody's very keen to have a frank chat with him.
Ordo paused, head tilted down for a second.
Val's back.
Fee couldn't stop himself from glancing at Atin, and noted that Darman had done the same. Atin had his chin tucked into the padded rim of his chest plate, and was idly scratching the scar that ran from just under his right eye and across his mouth to the left side of his jaw. It was a thin white line now, a faint memory of the raw red welt it had been when Fee first saw him, and Fee suddenly realized something he hadn't worked out before.
I think I know how he got that,
Fee thought to himself. Atin was from Sergeant Waylon Vow's training company, not Skirada's, and over the months, as casualties mounted and more partial squads were regrouped with men from other companies, they all swapped stories. The Vow stories didn't get a laugh at all.
You okay, Nevod?
Fine,
Atin said. He looked up, jaw set.
So how many bandits are we not going to slot, disintegrate, or speak harshly to then, Captain?
5, best intel says,
said Ordo.
We'll assume 10 then,
said Niner. Ordo paused for a moment, as if he thought Niner might be resorting to sarcasm. Fee could see it in the way his shoulders braced. He was a knife-edge kind of man, Ordo. But Niner was simply in literal mode, as he tended to be when things were getting intense. He always wanted to err on the side of caution. Ordo obviously knew that. He didn't bite.
By the way, General Termukin is operating around the Bothan sector and appears to be coping according to Commander Get,
he said.
And she's still packing the conch rifle, so your lesson wasn't wasted.
Beat swinging the shiny stick,
Fee said, winking at Darman.
It'd be fun to see her again, eh, Dar?
Darman smiled enigmatically. Atin was staring in slight defocus at the bulkhead, jaw clenched. Fee thought it was high time the bad guys dropped out of hyperspace and took their minds off the individual things that were troubling them, which included his stomach.
Ordo out,
the Blue Hollow said, and Niner's gloves held nothing but air again. Darman prepped his helmet, resetting the HUD with a prod of his finger.
Poor Ordica.
He called him by the affectionate nickname Skirada used in private, a kid's name, Little Ordo. In public, it was strictly Captain and Sergeant, and you could call your brother Vodka in the Mandalorian way, but nobody else could, and never in front of strangers.
Who'd want to be doing the filing when the rest of your batch are off saving the galaxy?
Well, I hear Comric is out at Utapau, and James cannoned up and gone hiking with extreme prejudice in the Bakura sector,
said Fee.
Fivik.
Knowing him, he's doing it for the fun of it. And as for Miral, well, why has Cal sent him out to Camino?
Niner clicked irritably again.
Anyone else want to discuss classified intel with Fee?
Sorry, Sarge.
The cabin was silent once more. Fee concentrated on the artificial horizon of his HUD to convince his stomach which way was up. The Mark III Kataran armor now had more enhancements and was rated blaster resistant up to light cannon rounds. Every op was full of new surprises from GAR procurement, like a birthday, according to Skirada, although Fee, like all his brothers, had never celebrated one. Now they even had a non-lethal pulsed energy projectile, or PEP, for the DC-17 that didn't exactly kill the targets, but certainly made their eyes water. It was Police Riot Control Kit, a deuterium fluoride laser. It would probably just annoy a Wookiee, but it sorted out humanoids in short order. Fee focused on the icons in the frame of his HUD and blinked one into action, sending chilled air across his face. That soothed his nausea. Then he isolated his audio channel and accessed a particularly thumping piece of Glimmick music. Niner cut in on the comm channel override.
Now what are you listening to?
Moncal opera.
Fee said.
I'm improving my mind.
Liar, I can see you nodding to the beat.
Relax, Sarge, please.
Fee thought to himself.
Want to listen in?
I'm psyched up enough, thanks.
Niner said. Darman shook his head. A-10 looked up.
Later, Fee.
Sicko glanced over his shoulder, excluded from the squad's conversation by their secure helmet-to-helmet comlink, but he could obviously see the body language that indicated they were chatting. Fee flicked to his frequency with a couple of blinks directed at the sensor inside his visor.
How about you, Nevod? Want some music?
No thanks.
Sicko had much the same neutral accent as most of the infantry trooper clones. They'd learned basic from flash instruction, and had rarely been exposed to outsiders with interesting accents.
But it's decent of you to offer.
Commandos owed their lives to the guts of these pilots. Omega had been extracted under heavy fire by their astonishing skill a number of times, and the TIV pilots were the most daring of the lot. Any gulfs between clone trooper, specialist, and the elite commando units had now been swept away by shared hardship, and they were all Vode An, all brothers. Fee was happy to indulge them. He killed the music feed and switched over to the open squad comlink again. The waiting was eating at him now.
Got trade,
said Sicko.
They should be jumping out of hyperspace any time now. 3 contacts.
He flicked the tracking display from his console onto a holo projection so they could see the pulses of color that represented the ships. No outlines or shapes, just a flickering array of numbers and codes to one side, awaiting a ship to tag.
Intercept in 2 minutes. They should all be less than a minute apart.
Bring us in starboard side, please,
said Niner.
There you go. The L6 is coming out first.
Sicko pressed a pad on the console, and Fee heard the grapple arms extend and retract like an athlete flexing muscles before an event. The display picked up the ship, then another.
But the second profile looks like an L6 too. Intel said...
Intel has occasionally been known to be less than 100% accurate, apparently.
A-10 sighed a fit of contempt.
You reckon?
Fee could see that he was checking ship's configuration data via his HUD.
I'm glad I'm shock-proofed.
But we like Intel,
said Fee.
No, not again. Let it be right this time,
he thought to himself.
Sergeant Cal never read us bedtime stories, so Intel satisfies our innate boyish need for heroic fantasy.
Is he always like this?
Sicko asked.
No, he's pretty quiet today.
Darman clutched a magnetic frame charge to his chest plate, his hatch persuader, as he liked to call it.
So are we going to jump the first crate or what? Play it by ear,
said Niner, who always seemed to resort to Skirata's voice under pressure. He hit the release on his restraints.
Let's see how it reacts when we approach. Pressure up helmets, gentlemen, and we're in business.
Coming about. And if we can't disable its drive, blow the navigation power conduit. The access ought to be outside the engineering compartment, but it's sometimes inside the port side bulkhead, 3 meters from the hatch. So knock the rotten thing out, will you? Or they'll bolt and drag us across 10 star systems.
Then the pilot punched the TIV into a 90-degree roll, and the apparently fixed constellations Fee had been watching tilted before his eyes. He understood instantly why they called the man Sicko. Fee grabbed a restraint instinctively, and his backpack hit the bulkhead.
Oh, terrific.
Whoa.
Fee could see through a cockpit screen as he steadied himself alongside the hatch. A box-like freighter. Yes, a Geyser L6, loomed out of the black nothing.
Interdict that,
Niner said. Fee reached for his jetpack controls, hanging right beside Darman in freefall. Sicko powered the TIV into a slow head-on approach and corkscrewed slowly to line it up and bring the deck head hatch against the port side of the freighter, landing lights on. The freighter slowed too. Darman stood ready, fingers flexing over the jetpack controls on his belt. He'd be first out, blowing the hatch controls when the blast-proof coaming sealed against the target's hull, pulling aside to let the others storm in. As the TIV moved sedately along the freighter's flank, the landing lights picked out the bright orange livery of Vode An containers.
Oops,
Said Sicko.
looks like the legit one. Back off then.
Niner said.
If the other ship sees this, we've lost.
A flash caught Fee's eye at the same time it did everyone else's. The second vessel was heading their way.
Another L6. Please don't let there be 3 of them.
Sicko said. The first L6 suddenly altered course with a rapid burn. It had probably picked up the wrong idea about a scruffy little ship in an area of space that was frequently populated by pirates. One of its spars wheeled 90 degrees almost instantly, looming in the TIV's view screen on collision course.
Abort, abort, abort!
Sicko yelled.
Brace, brace, brace!
He was cut short by a screech of tearing alloy that shuddered through the TIV, and suddenly it wasn't the tight gut acceleration of aborting, but the desperate scramble to survive. The impact spun the TIV off, and the last thing Fee saw as he somersaulted involuntarily was Sicko pulling on the yoke and punching a stabilizing burn to stop the spin. There was nothing Fee or the squad could do. It was all down to the pilot. Fee hated that moment of helpless realization every time. The display in his HUD shuddered like a cheap bootleg holovid as he hit the bulkhead harder than he thought possible in 0G.
Incoming, returning fire.
And then there was a light. Brilliant blue-white light. The instant hot rain of fragments peppered and pecked on the hull. Sicko had neutralized the incoming missile. The second L6 powered up and punched back into hyperspace in a flare of light.
Chew on that.
Sicko said, and slapped his fist hard on the console.
Foam deployed, hull breach secure. What's that?
Fee said, suddenly ice cold and focused and not nauseous at all.
BRB. What? Big red button. Emergency hull seal.
The remains of the freighter's missile cartwheeled slowly into the distance, trailing vapor. It was the kind of self-defense many freighters felt the need to carry these days. Wars created useful opportunity for the criminal community. Niner sighed.
Oh, Fearvik. Everyone knows we're here now. Anyone get his license number?
Fee said.
Maniac. Yeah, and more maniacs along shortly too.
Sicko turned his head towards the scanner readout.
Next one's due in 60 seconds, and the next one 2 minutes, I reckon. I hope he doesn't call for assistance, or we're going to have to bang out of here really fast. Tell me they're not going to notice that little fracas. They're not going to notice that little fracas. Foray, brother. You're welcome.
The pilot didn't take his eyes off the scanner.
Happy to lie to a comrade anytime, if it makes him feel better. There you go.
The next freighter fell out of hyperspace 1,500 meters from their port bow, and its pilot definitely noticed. Fee knew that because the immediate bright arc of laser cannon shaved the ELENT mast mounted on the TIV's nose, just as Sicko let loose a sustained volley into the freighter's underslung drive. It was still showering debris as Sicko brought the TIV about and swung back under the freighter to loop over its casing from its starboard quarter and bring the TIV, totally inverted, to rest hatch to hatch with the target. And there was nothing the crippled freighter could do about it. Sicko was too close in, too far inside the minimum range of its cannon, and now riding a very angry Raltiri tiger.
This is where you get off.
Sicko's voice was just a little shaky.
End of the line. Stand to,
Niner said. The skirt of coaming shot out of the TIV's hatch housing and sealed tight against the freighter's hull, while the grapple arms held it secure. The pressure equalization light flashed red, and the TIV's blast-proof inner hatch opened, then the outer one.
Dar, take it.
Dar slammed the frame charges on the freighter's hatch. The inner hatch snapped shut again, and a muffled whoop vibrated through the TIV. How Sicko had managed to bring the TIV alongside the port hatch without ramming the vessel or ripping the deckhead out of the TIV, Fee would never understand. But that was what trooper pilots did, and he was in awe of them. The inner hatch opened again. Darman bowled in 2 flashbangs, blinding, deafening stun grenades, and Niner was first through the hatch.
Go, go, go!
Fee, buoyed up on a wave of adrenaline, plunged through after him, DC-17 set to blaster mode. The TIV and Sicko were swept from his mind from that moment, as time disobeyed all the rules, and he was caught in an infinite slow-motion split second while the squad burst through the hatch and the L-6's artificial gravity smacked him down hard on the deck. The impact ran up through the soles of his boots. He was running for seconds before his proprioception caught up with the gravity, and his body said, "I remember this." But there weren't many places to run on an L6 freighter. It was a cockpit and a couple of cabins bolted to a Durasteel box of nothing. A-10 moved ahead and simply opened up with the DC's new pep laser, knocking 2 men flat in a massive shockwave of sound and light as they came out of the starboard cabin, firing blasters. Fee's anti-flash visor darkened instantly. Even with armor, he felt the shock of the Pep's unleashed energy. They all did. Fee ran on, over A-10 as he dropped to one knee to cuff and search the men, wrists to ankles, and then lay struggling for breath, whimpering. A Pep round was like being flashbanged and hit in the chest by several plastoid rounds at once. It was usually non-lethal. Usually.
2 down, 3 maybe to go.
Fee thought to himself. The cockpit doors didn't open when Niner stood back and hit the controls. A-10 caught up with Fee again, and they stood catching their breath. Niner motioned Darman into position at the cockpit doors.
Shame that Pep doesn't work through bulkheads. Confirmed. 3 still inside.
Darman said, running the infrared sensor sweep in his gauntlet up and down the seam of the doors.
Nothing in the port cabin.
Intel had it right for once. There were 5 bandits on board.
Encourage them to step outside, Dar.
Niner said, checking his DC's PEP setting. He peered at the power readout.
This thing actually scares me.
Darman unrolled a ribbon of adhesive thermal charge and pressed it around the door's weak points. Then he pushed the det into the soft material and cocked his head to one side as if calculating.
All that fuss getting in, and now we just walk over them. Anticlimactic, I think the word is.
There was a dull, echoing thud and screech of metal that vibrated through the deck. For a second, Fee thought the det had gone off prematurely, and that it was all a trick of his adrenaline-distorted perception, and that he was dead, but didn't know it yet. But it wasn't the det. Fee looked at Niner, and Niner looked at A-10, and Fee saw in Darman's viewpoint icon that he was staring at a fragment of flimsy that whipped past him, as if snatched by a sudden wind. It was being carried on a stream of air. Escaping air. Fee felt it grab him, and then he reached instinctively for a secure point to anchor them.
Hull breach,
Fee said, arms tight around a stanchion.
check suit seals.
They went into an automatic and long-drilled check of their suit systems. Kataran armor was vacuum-proofed. Fee's glove sensor confirmed his suit was still airtight, and the thumbs up from the rest of the squad indicated that their suit integrity was holding up too. The temporary gale of escaping air was abating.
Sicko, you're receiving,
said Niner. Fee had the same thought, and judging by the rapid breathing on the shared comlink, so had A-10 and Darman. The decompression was via the hatch, and that meant the seal formed by the TIV had been breached. On their comlink, there was only faint static, and the sound of their own breathing and swallowing.
Fearfic,
A-10 said.
Whatever it is, he's gone.
Niner motioned Darman to stand by the cockpit hatch and beckoned Fee to follow him.
Let's see if it's fixable. You two stay there. Well, we've probably lost 2 prisoners now,
Darman said.
Better make sure we haven't lost the rest.
There was no telling what had dislodged the Tiv, and whether they were going to meet someone boarding to deal with them. They made their way back up the passage to the entry hatch, DC-17s raised, and there was no sign of the 2 prisoners they'd left cuffed, nor anyone else. And the hatch, about 2 meters by 2, was wide open, star-speckled void, visible beyond. Fee grabbed the rail on one side of it and leaned out a little. It was a good way to get your head blown off, but he decided that the urgency of the situation warranted it. There was no sign of the Tiv. There was no sign of anything. He pulled himself back inboard. At least the gravity was still functioning. Niner checked the environment suits on his forearm plate.
Atmosphere's fully vented now.
They have to have a foam system in these things.
Yeah, but if you had us running around your vessel, would you seal the hull and help us out?
Is the cockpit airtight?
Fee asked.
We won't know for sure until they go cold, and we can't pick them up on infrared.
Niner switched on his tactical spot lamp and began searching the bulkhead for panels.
And by that time, we'll be ice cubes ourselves.
Kataran armor, even the Mark III version, was only good against vacuum for 20 minutes without a backup air supply, and they hadn't counted on being exposed that long. For some reason, Fee was distracted by Sicko's fate. It was a strange thing to discover when you were on borrowed time yourself, but Sicko had said the power conduits were routed via a panel 3 meters from here. Fee ejected the vibroblade from his knuckle plate and pried open the panel. Niner stood behind him and directed his spot lamp into the recessed mass of cabling, pipes, and wires.
That one's labeled Isolation Bulkhead,
Niner said.
Yeah, but where does that come down?
They looked up at the deck head for shutter housings. There were at least 3 back down the passage that they could see.
Let's play safe and withdraw to the one nearest the cockpit,
Niner said.
We could blow the whole panel here and shut everything down.
Including the gravity. Lovely.
Fee thought to himself.
Usually triggers emergency containment.
Niner put his glove to the side of his helmet. It was a nervous habit of his, just like the way he grew increasingly irritable with Fee as his stress levels peaked.
Da, are you getting this? Halfway there already,
said Darman's voice. Fee's chrono said they had 15 minutes left to make this work.
Okay, if Dar blows this remotely, and if it activates the emergency bulkhead, then we'll be stuck between that and the cockpit hatch.
And if there's atmosphere in there, we can open it and cozy up to the other 3 Hatun.
Or,
Fee said,
we find it's hard vacuum too, and then we'll be completely stuffed.
Stuffed if we don't,
said Darman, appearing at Fee's shoulder with a ribbon of thermal detonator tape.
Go on, get back there and wait for me while I set the timer.
We ought to call in a red 0.
Let's wait until we know if there'll be anything left of us to make it worth rescuing,
Niner said, trotting back down the passage. Fee watched him go, shrugged at Darman, and then patted the wide-open cover of the control panel.
Thanks, Sicko,
he said.